History is littered with tales that blur the line between myth and reality, but few are as unnerving and captivating as the legend of a Roman general who claimed to lead an army of the dead. His name was Gaius Aelius Varro, a once-forgotten commander of the late Roman Republic whose bizarre campaign in the shadowy highlands of Dacia, modern-day Romania, would earn him both fear and infamy. While official Roman annals barely mention his name, a scattering of letters, battlefield reports, and ancient inscriptions tell a different story. One of spectral warriors, night raids where no torches burned, and a commander who whispered to shadows and returned victorious from battles no living soldier could recall. Dismissed as madness by some and dark genius by others, Varro's tale lingers in the mist of forgotten campaigns, where the veil between life and death may have been torn apart by ambition, grief, and the hunger for conquest. Gaius Aelius Varro was born into a patrician family of modest standing in 92 BCE, a time when the Republic was fraying at its edges. Rome was expanding, devouring distant lands, and generals carved out kingdoms in the name of the Senate while secretly hungering for power. Varro, unlike the bombastic warlords of his time, was introspective and almost philosophical, a man obsessed not with riches, but with legacy. He had served loyally under several well-known commanders in Gaul and Hispania, but never made a name for himself until his appointment to command the Legio IX Ferrata on a punitive expedition into the Carpathians. Rome had grown weary of Dacian raids on her borders, and the Senate tasked Varro with teaching them a lesson. But what transpired deep in those eerie, forest-choked valleys would become something far stranger than a routine military campaign. From the outset, strange occurrences plagued Varro's march. His troops spoke of disembodied whispers in the woods and shadows moving just beyond torchlight. Scouts went missing, only to be found days later, alive, but hollow-eyed and mute, staring into nothing. The locals warned of ancient curses, spirits of slain warriors bound to protect the land, and warned Varro not to disturb the burial mounds scattered through the hills. But he was a Roman commander, pragmatic, rational, and above all else, defiant. He dismissed the tales as barbarian superstition and ordered his engineers to dismantle the burial sites for strategic ground. What followed was a series of victories so swift and inexplicable that even his most hardened centurions began to whisper behind closed tents. It was said that Varro never fought during the day. His legions marched at dusk and struck under moonlight. Witnesses, though few and scattered, claimed they heard no battle cries, only wind howling and metal clashing in unnatural rhythms. When dawn came, Dacian fortresses stood in ruins, their defenders slaughtered to the last man. Yet Varro's men swore they had not lifted a blade, had not left their camp during the night. Entire battles were won with no casualties on Rome's side, yet the fields were littered with dead enemies, their faces frozen in terror. Officers began to avoid Varro's command tent, where strange incense burned and ancient chants echoed. He no longer dined with his men. Instead, he was seen wandering the forests at night, murmuring to the trees, placing coins on stones and skulls, as if paying tribute to invisible allies. The most chilling testimony comes from a surviving centurion, Marcus Silanus, whose letters were later discovered sealed in a villa in Capua. He described one night in particular when the legion encamped near a river gorge. A dense fog descended, so thick it smothered torches. Varro ordered the men to stay put and then vanished into the mist alone. Hours passed in silence until the men heard screaming from across the ravine. When the fog lifted at dawn, a Dacian war camp had been utterly annihilated, tents shredded, horses disemboweled, warriors slaughtered. There were no footprints, no signs of siege or fire. Only eerie, frost-covered stones arranged in spirals and a sense of dread that clung to the men like smoke. "The general has death as his ally," Silanus wrote. Or perhaps he is something else entirely now. Varro's soldiers began to refer to him in hushed tones as Dux Umbrarum, the leader of shadows. Some believed he had struck a pact with the dead Dacian kings. Others thought he commanded the ghosts of Roman soldiers fallen in past campaigns, now bound to his will through dark rites. Rumors swirled that he had once lost a son in battle and had traveled to the Oracle of the Dead in Thesprotia, where necromancers spoke to him of ways to breach the walls between the worlds. While none could confirm it, Varro was known to carry a small, blackened urn wherever he went, a funerary object perhaps, or a vessel for something unspeakable. As the campaign wore on, Varro's victories grew more grotesque. Villages vanished overnight, leaving only scorched earth and ash. Dacian warriors would sometimes appear at Roman camps not to fight, but to surrender in exchange for death, claiming they'd seen their ancestors rise from the earth and command them to submit. There were reports of ghostly figures on the hillsides during battles, tall, robed silhouettes that did not bleed when struck and whose eyes glowed like embers. Some Roman recruits fled in terror, while others became fanatically loyal, convinced they were fighting under a man touched by the gods, or by death itself. By the time Varro returned to Rome, the Legio IX Ferrata was reduced to half its original strength, not from combat losses, but from desertion, madness, and suicides. The Senate, at first thrilled by his conquests and the annexation of a volatile region, soon grew wary of the whispers trailing behind him. Senators demanded answers about the nature of his campaign, but Varro, gaunt and hollow-eyed, offered only cryptic remarks. "The world is larger than you believe," he told them. "Rome's dominion stretches across land and sea, but I have found what lies beneath." He presented no spoils, no parade of chained captives, only maps scorched around the edges and crude idols taken from tombs. The Senate hushed the entire matter, quietly retiring Varro and forbidding any further expeditions into Dacia for a generation. Varro vanished from public life shortly after. Some say he returned to the Carpathians, drawn by whatever strange force had empowered his unholy campaign. Others claimed he was murdered in secret by a Senate fearful of his influence. A more chilling account tells of his body found in a forest outside Rome, surrounded by a perfect circle of bones, each bearing Roman military insignia from various eras, as if his phantom army had turned on him at last. The urn he always carried was missing, no tomb was erected, and his name was scrubbed from many records. But legends linger. In Dacia, locals still tell tales of pale warriors seen walking mountain passes during full moons, led by a man in Roman armor whose eyes burn like coals. Historians today remain divided on the truth of Varro's tale. Most dismiss it as a fusion of battlefield exaggeration, fear-induced hallucinations, and later medieval myth-making. But several archaeologists who have excavated ancient Roman campsites in Romania report strange findings: mass graves with bodies twisted in unnatural positions, remains of animals buried with coins in their mouths, and stone circles with scorch marks unexplainable by conventional fire. One scholar, Dr. Helena Vishan, claimed to have found an inscription carved into a cliff face near a ruined outpost that reads, "They came from silence, and to silence they return." Varro walks with them. The inscription was dated to the early 1st century BCE, and the dialect matched no known local language. Modern occult researchers, too, have weighed in, seeing in Varro's story echoes of ancient necromantic rites, including Etruscan rituals and Babylonian death cult practices, long believed lost. Some link him to early Christian legends of Roman soldiers cursed for disturbing sacred tombs, their souls doomed to wander the earth. Others point to his eerie similarities with figures like El Cid or even Arthurian myths of once great kings who do not die but merely sleep until called again. Could Varro have become something more than a man? Something timeless and dreadful, bound to the spirits he once commanded? What remains certain is this: Gaius Aelius Varro was not an ordinary Roman general. Whether through deception, madness, or a genuine brush with the supernatural, he bent the rules of war, and perhaps of reality itself. His shadow still looms over the haunted forests of Eastern Europe, and his story continues to grip the imagination of those drawn to the strange cracks in history where myth bleeds into truth. Perhaps one day more evidence will emerge, an artifact, a diary, or even a burial site that offers clarity. But until then, Varro's legacy endures as a whisper in the night, a ghost march echoing down the corridors of time. And if one finds themselves alone in the Carpathians as the fog rolls in, they might listen closely and hear the footsteps of an army that no longer breathes, still following the man who dared to command the dead.